some of you have had a chance to meet Robert. He will also be great and responsive. So let me quickly go through a number of items, and I'll start larger and get more local, and then open up for questions. I don't need to tell you how challenging this last year has been with COVID and the pandemic, and our health department has really played a major role in both the response to the pandemic, as well as really trying to prepare us in vaccinations and how we move forward. So my first message for everybody really is that now we have booster shots available, and everyone 65 or older is clearly eligible. And if you're under 65 and you have occupational risks or you have some underlying medical conditions, you can also get a free booster shot if it's been 6 months since your last shot, essentially. And they're available through your healthcare provider, pharmacies, or our own county sites. We still continue to operate a number of sites, including in West County. I feel really fortunate that in Contra Costa are really proud that with all the work we've done, this county has one of the higher vaccination rates. Prior to the recent action by CDC to make those 5 to 11 now eligible for vaccines, when we had 12 and older, 87% of people 12 and older in our county have been vaccinated, and that number now that it's 5 and older, the eligible population, it's 82% of people 5 and older have been vaccinated. And you'd be interested to know in Kensington that number is over 90%. Wow. So Kensington is really responded, and I think that is really important because while we've seen a drop in cases and hospitalizations, it's sort of hit a plateau. The health officers in the Bay Area have been working together a lot at trying to have common sort of rules in place to be helpful in the Bay Area. And, we don't know what's going to happen in the winter. There could be another surge like there was last winter because people spend more time indoors. So the message is, get vaccinated if you haven't, get the booster shot if you're eligible, and still really be cautious because there is still concern about potential surges during the winter. Let me move right into sort of the local issues. There's been a lot of effort in Kensington and really around the county on wildfire issues. I won't go into too much detail. I know there's a number of you who are involved with them, but I do want to mention a couple of developments. So some of you may know that a year ago we passed a countywide sales tax called Measure X, which is new revenue for services around the county to county government, but that money will also flow through to other agencies in some cases. And one of the highest priorities for us has been fire, emergency preparedness, and health. The Board of Supervisors has heard a recommendation from an advisory committee that we established about Measure X. And one of the categories that's been identified, and I strongly advocate for, is more money for wildfire-related prevention issues. And so there's an allocation that we'll talk about at our meeting on December 16th that is $4.5 million per year for two things. Additional hand crews that will work year-round around the county, including in Kensington, for clearing vegetation and brush on public lands. And that would also include working on larger fuel break projects. And it will also include, we're going to look at developing a program to help homeowners who can't afford to clear their own property, to help them do that. We've heard stories of people, including along the Arlington, who've had their fire insurance canceled because a neighbor didn't clear their brush, and it makes their house more vulnerable. So this would be $4.5 million a year to also leverage more federal or state grants, but it's a new source of revenue to be used specifically in the urban interface areas. As I say, like Kensington, the money will come through the Contra Costa Fire district, but will go to other agencies. And I know our fire chief works closely with your fire chief, as well as East Bay Regional Parks fire chief and Richmond's. On that, also we've had a regular meeting every month or so, or 6 weeks, with residents along the interface from Kensington, El Cerrito, East Richmond, El Sobrante, to talk about these issues. You are welcome to join. You can email us to get added to that Zoom meeting. And we have had the fire chiefs regularly there from all the agencies, and we appreciate that. And it's a chance for residents to be able to ask questions of the fire folks, and also for the fire folks to hear directly from residents and talk about a number of issues. So again, you're all welcome to join those regular meetings. We've also, and I know KIC recently sent out a survey regarding undergrounding, and I know undergrounding issues have come up every few years in Kensington. I think there's extra interest in it now because of fire-related issues. I've actually gotten a request by some property owners in a particular part of Kensington to actually meet with them to talk about what it would be, what would be involved for their neighborhood to underground. Of course, it could be a larger community issue as well. So I'll look forward to hearing back from KIC about your survey, and if you want to engage that issue. It is a complicated, a long process, and it's potentially expensive, but everyone has to judge whether, paying for that over time makes sense. So I'm open to facilitating those discussions with everyone. I also want to thank, I know KIC is involved with lighting and landscape issues, and I just met this week with a few of you from KIC about looking at what can be done to beautify and improve the area around the parking lot on the Arlington that is owned by the county special district. So looking forward to continuing to work with KIC about that. I know we are finally, and I'll take responsibility, it's been a busy summer. We wanted to have a meeting with our PATHS stakeholder group, but to be honest, there was just a lot on my plate, on our office's plate this summer. But we are going to have our first meeting in November. We have put together a stakeholders group to sort of explore and look at the possibility of public ownership, county ownership of the paths. I know some of you have talked about the value of those paths, also possibly for evacuation purposes. So I'm looking forward to having that meeting and working with KIC on that as well. And actually, as part of the meeting that we had up at the parking lot on the Arlington, we talked with Public Works. Folks have asked, when is the next sort of overall surface treatment going to happen in Kensington? And we're told by Public Works that in the next 2 to 3 years, all the streets and roads will be resurfaced in Kensington. I do want to talk briefly about a broader issue, and then I'll open it to questions. There's a lot more we can cover, but I want to hear sort of your questions. Air quality is important for all of us, and some of you, I'm sure, have seen the recent increase in flaring at the Chevron refinery. Earlier in the summer, I serve on the Bay Area Quality Management District. We passed a very new, I think strongest in the nation, stringent rule to limit particulate matter out of some of the units at that refinery. Particulate matter, as you know, is really presents a health risk in many ways. So despite that rule, there is flaring, which is a different process that's been occurring, and I've been in contact with our Air District staff about looking at how do we strengthen our flaring rule, and I actually have been talking to Assembly Member Buffy Wicks about seeing if we could get a bill carried to increase fines and penalties. It is unacceptable what's happening, the increase in flaring over the last couple of years at the refinery. I'm sure some of you can see it. Sometimes you can smell it, and so I just wanted to address that we're working on that issue. Lots of other things happening, but I will say the last thing on Measure X, one of the things we're also going to use Measure X funding for is to help the city of Pinole reopen a closed fire station in Pinole Valley. And that's important because frankly, we all benefit when we have adequate fire service in our region of the county. And that one fire station closed a few years ago, but we thought it was important to support the city in reopening, because if there's a wildfire, for example, out in Pinole Valley, resources from other areas go out there to cover that. So being up at full strength in West Contra Costa County is really important. So we're going to probably allocate about $2 million a year out of Measure X to reopen that fire station, with the city of Pinole putting in about $1.5 million a year. So with that, I covered it as quick as I could. I'll open it to questions.
Okay, thank you so much, John. The first question is Stephen Simran would like to know, what is the status of the view ordinance revision?
So good question. The county council has put a draft together that incorporates the model ordinance that we all talked about in our work group. It is sitting on my desk to review. It looks good, but I want to sort of so as soon as I get back to county council on that, we're going to have another meeting of our tree group to sort of move forward with that. But county council finished a draft based on the model that we all talked about in the group.
Okay, the next question is Andrew Conley would like to know the status of the Point Melody process and what's happening there right now.
Sure. So for those that don't know, Point Melody, this is an issue within the city of Richmond. I've personally, although I'm obviously not on the Richmond City Council, I've been working with a number of those who are working to save Point Melody from development. It is actually an old naval fuel depot that was transferred to the city. It's also in a high severity fire zone adjacent to the Chevron refinery in the city. A previous city council had approved moving forward with the developer for a lot of high-end homes out there, and it's all tied up in a lawsuit between the city and a coalition of folks who've been working to oppose that. I've been supporting their efforts in the ways that I can. I serve on the Bay Conservation Development Commission, and when an issue came up before BCDC to start to explore changing the land use designation for that area from open space to mixed use, which would open up the shoreline to development, I successfully had our commission put off starting that process, saying, frankly, we need to look at that further. So it did not move forward at BCDC, but we'll see. Right now, it's really tied up in litigation between the city and third parties who sued on it. But I've been supporting the effort of those who are challenging that project to keep it as open space, and we've had discussions and meetings with the East Bay Regional Park District and other potential funders. The shoreline, I live down on the Marina Bay area, Richmond shoreline. I understand the value of having open space along the shoreline, and the reason we have it is because people have fought so hard to really to sue in cases and to preserve the shoreline.
Okay, thank you. The next question is Mark Wagner would like to know, what is the update on the tree ordinance?
I think I just mentioned that. So, well, maybe there's two questions. There's a tree obstructing view ordinance and a tree ordinance. So maybe I'll give this. So the one we've been focusing on in Kensington is this special ordinance for tree obstruction views, and that's the one which deals with conflicts between property owners. That's the one that county council's revised, that we're going to go back and have our stakeholder meeting. Separately from that, county-wide, there's a general tree ordinance that more deals with permits on when trees can be removed and things like that. And I thought that there was really good input from the Kensington community and others to tie wildfire and other issues into that. So our planning department has gone back to look at that. And so that's the second tree ordinance that's countywide, and they're still working on that. I haven't seen any what they've come out with yet, but we'll have a meeting once they do that.
Okay. Thank thank you. The next question is Catherine de Niergaard would like to know a little bit more about the county master plan to downzone part of Kensington to allow more housing units to be built.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. That is actually not true. So what's happened is, but I think there's some legitimate questions about that. The county is collapsing its various land use categories so that there's less rather than more. And in the process of that, I think it looks and appears like that may be the case. I've been in contact with our planning department to be clear that there are policies that do not increase densities in Kensington, period. So just so you know, that's and I think hopefully as that comes up more, we'll put out another meeting. There is not a proposal, as we've said. I think the planning department has actually, I think they've heard what Kensington residents were concerned about because of this collapsing again of the various density categories. I think there is clearly a legitimate perception that people have that would happen. So I've been trying to work with the planning department to make sure the policies are clear that doesn't happen, which raises another issue. We've recently heard concern about whether to allow additional ADUs in high severity fire zones. And I think that's a really good issue that's been raised and deserves us looking at that, is whether we want the state has passed a law which pretty much requires cities and counties to approve on an administrative basis certain second units, ADUs, if they meet certain qualifications. And that's a state law. So I think there's an issue now of whether that should be applied in certain areas where there are fire risks that are in a high severity fire zone. And so that is an issue, I think, that deserves some more, exploration, and frankly, maybe working with the state on that. Because, as I say, these are sort of mandatory requirements from the state of when cities and counties have to approve ADUs. But I think it runs inconsistent with some of our other goals, which is really not to add more density in certain high severity fire areas like Kensington.
Okay, thank you so much. That concludes our Q&A session for Supervisor Joya. Linda?
And I'll stay on for a bit and try to answer questions that I see in the chat as I listen to your next speaker as well. So thanks everybody. And of course, you contact my office anytime on any issues.
Yeah, thank you again, John. As usual, you're always there for us, and we truly appreciate it.